In 1939, Hollywood created what many still consider the greatest film of all time. Gone with the Wind swept audiences into the Old South with a passion and grandeur that has never been matched. But behind the velvet curtains and Southern Belle costumes lay real people actors whose lives would be forever changed by their brush with cinematic immortality. Today, we pull back those curtains to reveal the untold stories of what became of the stars who brought Margaret Mitchell's epic to life. Some found lasting fame, others faced tragic ends, and a precious few, well, their stories will leave you speechless. In the dimly lit corridors of Hollywood history, one voice still echoes from the golden era of Gone with the Wind, that of Mickey Coon, the last surviving credited cast member of the epic masterpiece. At just 6 years old, when filming began, Mickey played Bo Wilkes, Ashley's son, in what would become cinema's most celebrated drama. Today, at 94 years old, Mickey Coon carries within his memory the living essence of a Hollywood that exists now only in black and white photographs and fading reels of film. He remembers the towering presence of Clark Gable, whose mustache seemed even more magnificent in person. He recalls Vivien Leigh's infectious laughter between takes, and the way she would kneel down to speak to him at eye level, her British accent soft and reassuring. But Mickey's memories hold darker truths as well. He witnessed the tension on set when Vivien would disappear for hours, later understood to be early signs of the mental illness that would torment her throughout her life. He saw Hattie McDaniel eating her lunch alone, segregated from the white cast members, a painful reminder of the era's cruel realities that the film itself helped perpetuate. In interviews, Mickey describes the surreal experience of attending the film's premiere as watching himself on the massive screen while searchlights swept the Atlanta sky. Little did he know, he was witnessing the end of an era both for the Old South depicted in the film and for the golden age of Hollywood that created it. Mickey continued acting into the 1980s, appearing in films like Red River alongside John Wayne, but eventually, he left Hollywood behind, choosing a quieter life away from the cameras. He became a successful business owner, married, and raised a family, all while carrying the secret stories of Hollywood's most legendary production. Today, Mickey Coon stands as our last living bridge to that magical time when movies were more than entertainment, they were dreams made manifest on silver screens. Clark Gable was more than an actor, he was the very definition of masculine charm, the template from which Hollywood leading men were cast for generations. His portrayal of Rhett Butler didn't just make him famous, it made him immortal. But even kings must face their final curtain call. In the years following Gone with the Wind, Gable's life took on the quality of a Greek tragedy. He had reached the pinnacle of success, yet personal happiness seemed to slip through his fingers like smoke. His marriage to Carole Lombard, the great love of his life, ended abruptly in 1942 when her plane crashed into a Nevada mountain during a war bond tour. Friends said Gable was never quite the same after that night. He threw himself into World War II service, flying dangerous bombing missions over Europe, perhaps seeking the kind of dramatic end that would befit Rhett Butler himself. But fate had different plans. Gable returned from the war, a changed man, older, wearier, carrying invisible scars that no amount of Hollywood glamour could heal. The 1950s brought a career resurgence with films like Mogumbo and The Misfits, but those close to Gable noticed the signs. The drinking had increased. The legendary stamina was fading. On November 16, 1960, at the age of 59, Clark Gable suffered a heart attack just days after completing The Misfits, a film that would prove prophetic in its title. But here's where the story takes an eerie turn. Gable's last co-star, Marilyn Monroe, would be dead within 2 years. His director, John Huston, later claimed the film was cursed. Some whispered that Gable had pushed himself too hard during filming, determined to prove he was still the king of Hollywood even as his body betrayed him. The man who had told Scarlett O'Hara, frankly, "My dear, I don't give a damn," gave his final performance with characteristic stoicism, never letting on that his heart was failing. In death, Clark Gable achieved something even more powerful than fame. He became eternal, forever frozen at the moment of his greatest triumph, walking away from Tara with that devil-may-care smile. There has never been, and may never again be, a performance quite like Vivien Leigh's Scarlett O'Hara. She didn't just play the role, she became it, embodying the fierce determination and tragic beauty that made Margaret Mitchell's heroine unforgettable. But the same intensity that made her performance legendary would ultimately consume her. When David O. Selznick chose the virtually unknown British actress over hundreds of established Hollywood stars, he unleashed forces that would change her life forever. Vivien threw herself into the role with a passion that bordered on obsession. She studied every nuance of Southern society, perfected the accent until it sounded more authentic than many native Georgians, and pushed her body to its limits during the grueling production. But behind the emerald eyes that captivated millions lay a mind at war with itself. Vivien Leigh suffered from what was then poorly understood bipolar disorder, which in the 1940s was often dismissed as female hysteria or simply temperament. The extreme emotional demands of playing Scarlett seemed to awaken something dark within her psyche. Her tempestuous marriage to Laurence Olivier became the stuff of Hollywood legend. Two of the greatest actors of their generation locked in a passionate, destructive dance that played out both on stage and in their private lives. Friends described their relationship as electric, magnetic, and ultimately toxic. They would have screaming fights that could be heard through hotel walls, followed by reconciliations so tender they moved witnesses to tears. The 1950 South brought continued professional success with A Streetcar Named Desire, but Vivian's mental health deteriorated. She would disappear for days during manic episodes, engage in reckless behavior, and then sink into depressions so deep that she became nearly catatonic. Hollywood whispered about her difficult nature, not understanding that she was fighting a battle no one could see. On July 8, at the age of 53, Vivien Leigh was found dead in her London apartment, having succumbed to tuberculosis, a disease that seemed almost poetic for someone who had burned so brightly. She died alone, but her final performance as Scarlett O'Hara ensures she will never truly be forgotten. Leslie Howard never wanted to play Ashley Wilkes. The distinguished British actor thought the role was too weak, too passive for his tastes. He preferred characters with backbone. With Fire not the dreamy, ineffectual Southern gentleman that Scarlett pined after throughout Gone with the Wind. Little did anyone know that his reluctance to play Ashley would be overshadowed by a heroism that would cost him everything. Howard's portrayal of Ashley became the perfect counterpoint to Clark Gable's Rhett Butler, where Rhett was passionate and unpredictable. Ashley was gentle and principled. Where Rhett embraced life's chaos, Ashley retreated into poetry and dreams. It was a performance that required tremendous subtlety, and Howard delivered it with the kind of understated brilliance that only truly great actors possess. But as the 1930s drew to a close, Howard's attention turned from Hollywood glamour to the growing darkness spreading across Europe. Unlike many actors who saw World War II as something happening over there, Howard felt a deep personal responsibility to his homeland. He began using his celebrity status to produce and appear in propaganda films designed to boost British morale and encourage American support for the war effort. In 1943, Howard embarked on what would be his final mission, a trip to Lisbon to deliver lectures and promote British culture. Friends warned him that Nazi agents were monitoring his movements, that traveling by commercial airliner over waters patrolled by German U-boats was essentially suicide. But Howard, displaying a courage that Ashley Wilkes never possessed, insisted on completing his mission. On June 1, 1943, Flight 777 from Lisbon to London was shot down by German fighters over the Bay of Biscay. All aboard perished, including Leslie Howard. He was 50 years old. Later investigations suggested that the Germans had deliberately targeted the flight because they believed Winston Churchill was aboard, but it was only Leslie Howard, the gentle actor who had played a Confederate dreamer, making the ultimate sacrifice for his country. In a tragic irony, the man who portrayed the weak Ashley Wilkes died a hero's death, proving that sometimes reality is far more dramatic than any script Hollywood could devise. Olivia de Havilland's portrayal of Melanie Hamilton remains one of cinema's most challenging achievements, making goodness compelling. In a film filled with passionate, flawed characters, Melanie stood as a beacon of pure virtue. Yet de Havilland somehow made her human rather than sad. It was a performance that mirrored the actress's own character. For Olivia de Havilland lived a life of remarkable grace, dignity, and longevity that would span over a century. When filming began on Gone with the Wind, de Havilland was already establishing herself as one of Hollywood's most dependable leading ladies, often playing opposite Errol Flynn in swashbuckling adventures. But Melanie represented something different.